Shalom, this is Melech Ben Yaakov of Biblical Life Coaching, and I'm coming to you today from Marrakech, Morocco. We're in Morocco for a little while. So last video is from Marrakesh, this video is from Marrakesh, from a different place. Kind of in the center of town. We're renting an apartment for a little while, and hope you enjoy the scenery in the background. I'll try to kind of move around a little bit and give you different views so you don't have to look at my boring face the whole time as I try to explain what I'd like to explain. So this is the second video in the Biblical Life Coaching series. Just before I start, and I will get right to the point, you can visit our website at www.biblicallifecoaching.com. There you'll find out all the information. And let's get right down to business. So, I've called this video, I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. And let me explain exactly what this means. This is a little phrase that I came up with years ago. And I've been saying it to myself, I say it to myself on a regular basis when I do something that I feel is less than up to my standards. So let me give you the example today. I had planned to get up at a certain time this morning, and we went to sleep late last night, and I planned to get up at a certain time this morning, and unfortunately when that time came I just found myself wallowing around in bed a little bit longer, or a lot longer to be honest, and watching YouTube videos for a while and stuff like that before I finally rolled out of bed 2 hours later than I had actually planned to get out of bed. Okay, so what's the usual situation, or what's the usual reaction in this situation? Again, let me just walk around a little bit just to keep it not boring. So what's the usual reaction in this situation? The usual reaction that I think most people have, and that I've certainly have had in the past and still have sometimes, although I try to work on it, is feelings of guilt, feelings of self-loathing, feelings of woe is me, I'm such a horrible person, I'm such a lazy person, I'm such a worthless person, I planned to get out of bed at 8:30 and I got out of bed at 10:30, or whatever the case may be. And this now can go ahead and and ruin your entire day. You have now set yourself up for a day whereby you've already, from the very beginning, kind of sabotaged the day. You've put yourself in a negative mental state. You've thought negative things about yourself, and now you're going to go ahead and you're going to carry that out throughout your day. And of course, that's not going to certainly make your day a better day, not internally, and of course externally, because the external is to a large extent, although not fully. I disagree with some of these, hippy-dippy New Age types that say, the external world is just completely a projection of the internal world. It is to a large degree, but we interact with an external world out there. At any rate, without getting into long philosophies, you are now going to set up your day, your internal world and your external world, in a way that's not going to be very productive. It's going to be filled with those same feelings of guilt, of self-loathing, of woe is me, of feelings of inferiority. Everyone else got up early and is out there doing the thing, and I didn't. I'm just using the example of getting up early as an example, but there are many other examples. It could be anything that you've done that's negative, that you did not want to do. A classic example, or maybe one of the most classic examples in this day and age, is the example I gave, just sitting on the internet. You plan to sit on the internet for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to pass the time, just relax, and all of a sudden you wake up from a daze, excuse me, and it's about 2 or 3 hours later. One of my favorite life coaches, Brendan Burchard, you can check him out on the internet, and he has lots of great videos. One of my favorite life coaches, Brendan Burchard, calls this browser blackout. You sit down for 5 minutes, take a little coffee break or something like that, and the next thing you realize, it's 3 hours later and you've been on the internet for 3 hours. Okay, so this can happen to all of us. Whatever it is, whatever you've done wrong, whether it's sleeping late, whether it's blacking out on the internet, whether it's, I don't know, there's so many examples out there. Some negative action or thing that you've done that you don't like yourself doing, eating too much, smoking a cigarette, drinking too much, whatever the case may be. Okay, So whatever you've done, there's a way that I've developed to get out of it. And I just repeat this phrase to myself when I've gotten into this kind of situation. I repeat this phrase, and the phrase is, I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but hold on, I'm just going to get something out of the way here. It's annoying me. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. Okay, that's my phrase. It's a kind of a dumb phrase. It rhymes, I guess, kind of. But it works. And the idea is that, so let's take the example of when I planned to get out of bed at a certain time this morning, and I got out of bed 2 hours later. To break myself out of this negative cycle, I just said to myself, okay, I made my mistakes, okay, I've sinned in the past, but now it stops. Now it stops. From this moment on, I'm a new person. Even if that new person only lasts for 1 minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a half an hour or a day or a week. Okay, right now I stop the shenanigans, I stop the baloney, and starting right now, I'm a new person. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. And I think there's a very deep message here, and a very Torah-based and Tanakhic message here, which is the idea of repentance. We can make mistakes in the past, but that doesn't mean that we can carry those mistakes, that we have to carry those mistakes towards the future. And just as God, just as Yehovah forgives us for our past mistakes, we have to learn to forgive ourselves for our past mistakes as well. That's maybe even harder to do than having Yehovah, having God forgive us for our past mistakes. God is Chanun v'rachum. He's kind and he's merciful. We unfortunately are not so kind and merciful, especially when it comes to ourselves. Who is it who said? I'm trying to think who it is. Yes, it's another one of my favorite spiritual teachers or life coaches, Marianne Williamson, also very famous. You can look her up on the internet. Again, I don't agree with everything she says, but one thing I remember she says at the beginning of her book is something along the lines of, other people may be mean to us, but we're vicious to ourselves. And it's absolutely true. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies. We're our own worst critics. Where the self-critic is much worse than the critic towards the other people. So we want to break out of that. We want to break out of that that pattern. And so that's what I do. Okay, so let's take the example. I woke up 2 hours later than I expected to this morning. I wallowed on the internet for a while, looking at YouTube videos, whatever. And then finally I said, you know what? Okay, it's now 10:30. It's time to get out of bed. Instead of feeling guilty, okay, I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. My past is not necessarily going to be my future. And that's it. I got out of bed and I said, that's it. Starting right now, I do what I have to do. I'm making breakfast, I'm cleaning up, I'm doing whatever the situation may be. Okay? I hope the idea is clear. I'm going to say it again. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. Just say that to yourself, or come up with your own phrase, any other phrase that will help you break out of that negative pattern, that sense of guilt and negative feelings towards yourself. I'm going to give you another example. I remember way back in the day when I first started getting into Torah, and I went to Jerusalem, and I learned at a place called Eshet Torah. I'm so used to calling it something else, but I won't say it on the internet. I learned at a place called Eshet Torah, and there was a rabbi there who's also famous. You can look him up, and his name, famous, maybe not as famous as the other two people I mentioned, but famous in certain circles. And he taught us in one of his classes a very similar idea. And the idea was that at any point you could say, you could stop what you're doing, okay, you could stop your negative behaviors, you could stop your negative patterns, and you could just say the words, begin again now. And he actually wrote a book called Begin Again Now. His name is Zelig Pliskin, okay? And this influenced me. Maybe this influenced me subconsciously and consciously over the years, and I came up with my own phrase. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. But the idea is the same, okay? You're sitting there, you're eating too much, you're drinking, you're lazing out in front of the television or in front of the internet. You wanted to get X, Y, and Z done today, but you barely got half of X done today, and you're just feeling down about yourself. You could just at any given moment say, begin again now, stop. Okay, the shenanigans, the baloney, stop right here, and from this moment on, now I go ahead and I do what I need to do. I do what I want to do. And it's actually very empowering in a number of ways. Number one, as I mentioned before, it's the power of forgiving yourself. It's extremely important for us to forgive ourselves as I said earlier. Okay, that's an extremely important task, an extremely important art to learn, because it's so easy for us to get down on ourselves. We have to learn to constantly forgive ourselves, because we're only human beings. Okay, we're not God, we're not Yehovah, we're not perfect. We make mistakes and we have flaws, and we're constantly working to improve ourselves, and we make mistakes every single day, every single hour. We make mistakes, and that's just the way it is. So it's very important. Just as Yehovah is Hanun v'Rachum, we have to emulate him and imitate him. We also have to be Hanun v'Rachum, kind and merciful, and learn to forgive ourselves and the people around us. That's number one. Okay, and the second thing it does is it resets. It's kind of like a reboot. I hate to use that word because it's an overused word these days, but it's a reset. It's a reboot. It's like pressing the reboot button, and you say, okay, that's the past, and now's the future. And when I say the future, it doesn't mean that you're not going to go back in an hour or 2 hours or later in the day or tomorrow and make the same mistake again. You might. You will. You probably will. I know I certainly do. It's entirely possible that tomorrow morning I'll plan to get up a certain time, and I'll sit in bed looking at the internet again for an hour or so, or 2 hours or so. But at least I know that I can do that again. I could say I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. Or I can say begin again now. Okay? I can make my at least immediate future, and hopefully over time build a habit to make it a kind of a permanent habit or a permanent future. I can build a habit, or I can make my immediate future one that is distinctly separated from the sins, quote unquote, and the mistakes that I've made in my past. So that's my advice to you. When you're in a lull, when you've eaten too much, when you've drank too much, when you've smoked too much, when you've slept too much, when you've yelled at your kids and felt guilty about it afterwards, when you've just, having a crazy day and taking it out on everyone around you, when anything else that you can think of is getting you off your track, is getting you off your center, is getting you off your self-awareness and your active consciousness. What's the word that everyone likes to use today? Your I can't think of it. Not consciousness, not centeredness. At any rate, I'm not going to think of it now. When you're falling asleep at the wheel and you're not taking active responsibility for your thoughts, your words, and your actions, then at any given time you could stop that process. You can just say, I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice, or whatever other phrase you want to come up with, and then you take the bull by the horns at that point, and from that moment forward, you go ahead, you do what you have to do, you get done what you have to get done, and you try to turn things around, at least temporarily, and again, once you've developed the habits, hopefully on a more permanent basis. So that's my message for today. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. Let's maybe go out I'll turn the camera around, boom, give you a little view of Marrakech, Morocco. It's kind of a crazy city, a lot of noise here. Very beautiful, very interesting city. If anyone has watched my videos, then they've seen a lot about it, but I'm not going to belabor it here, but I'll just show you very quickly. This is kind of in the center of town, in the neighborhood called Gilis, and maybe you can get a little impression of it. Let's see, are there any landmarks I can point out? That's the mall over there, the Kare Eden Mall. It's called. Off to the left is right over there is the main street, Mohammed V Street. Down this block, although you can't see it, would be the main mosque, or one of the main mosques of the city. And it's very hot. It's about 100 degrees, or it will be about 100 degrees today, which is actually kind of cool. The other day it reached 112 degrees, so I'm actually enjoying a break from the hot weather with only 100 degrees. At any rate, I'll turn the camera back. That's me again, and I will say that once again, whenever you get in a rut, whenever you get stuck, whenever you've become unconscious and just fallen asleep at the wheel, wake yourself up and get back on track by saying, I've sinned once, I've sinned twice, but I shall not sin thrice. Throw negative emotions such as guilt, self-loathing, feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. Throw those right out the window. They're not productive emotions. They're not productive feelings, and replace it with with good feelings and with positive feelings that are going to get you to do what you need to do through the day. I've sinned once, I've sinned twice. It stops right now. I shall not sin thrice. This is Melech Ben Yaakov of biblicallifecoaching.com. You can check us out at the website, www.biblicallifecoaching.com. You can look at our Facebook page, Biblical Life Coaching, and there you can find links to other things such as YouTube and Twitter. Thanks for joining us, and talk to you again soon.